Hi, everyone. There I am in my big, loud, booming voice. This is Dave Williams, your host of the Find Your New Normal weekly talk show. That on season 3, we're really talking about those issues that people face when they're involved with a crisis, dealing with it or contending with it. And we're discovering that living in the moment is perhaps the central concept that we want to be talking about over the last couple of weeks and the next few weeks. And we're using this wonderful technology that I, as a digital marketing specialist, use all the time with my clients to get our messages out there. And one of the wonderful people I've met on my journey is my special friend and I guess I'll call her my spiritual guide, Sheila Schuster, who's beside me. I'm not sure on the replay how things get moved around, but let me pass the audience over to you, Sheila, to welcome them all before we introduce our guest today.
Thank you, Dave. As always, such a pleasure to be here. This is always such a great conversation and a time I really look forward to. My name is Sheila Schultz, and I'm a speaker and a facilitator on stress management and adapting to change. I've had a lot of different experiences in my life and had lots of different careers, but about 7 years ago, I had a series of losses that sort of changed my direction, and I found some really valuable things that have worked for me, and that's how I got connected with Dave, and as he was going through a cancer crisis, and we've taken off from there, and I'm really excited to be here this week. Thanks.
And you are Sheila Schultz, not Schuster. That's been a conversion process just a few weeks ago. A very happy conversion process.
Yes.
Those of you who know me will understand why I'm saying it's a conversion process. But all the best to Sheila and Scott. They've had a wonderful union, and Sheila's in that process of retraining me to think of her as a Schultz and not a Schuster. And together we're welcoming a past guest. Back in April, we had Dr. Shani Fox with us. Just a very special lady. Those of you that are following her on Facebook and on her website and the many articles she writes on Huffington Post and the Healthy Living Schedule will know that she's a holistic physician, and yet not just medically trained. She's also a certified life coach. And she's built a practice around helping cancer patients, but also people in different levels of stress and crisis management. And we met her a few months ago to talk about what happens with cancer patients as they're dealing with the fears and loss of power. And that discussion got me thinking that wouldn't it be great if she would agree to come back to us today to talk about, claiming your power when you're in a crisis, not necessarily a cancer crisis, but as you know from the last few shows, crisis comes in many forms, whether it's, a hurricane that many people on the East Coast are facing this week as Hurricane Matthew moves up, and we send thoughts and prayers to all those folks. But there are other kinds of crisis dealing with death and disease, and Shani has been spending a lot of her time on that topic. So welcome, Shani. Could you tell a little bit about tell our audience about your passion and what's brought you to this area of crisis management?
Certainly. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. As you said, I'm a trained holistic physician, and having gone to naturopathic school, so therefore having the tools of lifestyle medicine, I quickly realized as soon as I went into practice that this is an ideal skill set to support cancer survivors. As we all know that people go through cancer treatment, they're taken care of very well during treatment, but then typically on the last day everybody says, hey, be happy you're done. and the survivor themselves, they know they're not done. They feel like they've just fallen off a cliff because their treatment team goes on to the next patient, and there they are not knowing what to do, how to do it, and nobody to really ask. The tools that I had as a holistic physician were great for filling in this gap, certainly for helping people learn. They have questions about what to eat, often they can't sleep, but all those lifestyle issues I was able to support very well. So that's how I started working with cancer survivors. It didn't take long, though, while working with cancer survivors, that I realized that for all that I could help them get their bodies back into shape, I'm great at that, but there was a whole dimension of this experience that took place in the mental emotional realm. And if I was not offering something to help with that, then I was not a holistic practitioner. I really had to take the whole thing into account and at least find out how I could help people or help them get support with this. Well, I also quickly realized, maybe this is obvious to the audience, but I'm not sure it's obvious to the medical establishment. Cancer survivorship is not a disease. At this point, the person is hopefully free of disease, or they're living in a more stable state, let's say, even if some cancer may still be present. But the point is, this is not a disease that needs to be diagnosed anymore or treated as a disease. The whole point of cancer survivorship is to be well. It's to be well. And that is what I found, that I could be an expert in supporting that. I can help people move themselves, first of all, into the mindset of, let's get myself well. And then, how do we actually make that happen, both physically and mental, emotionally? So my skill set fits so well, I just went and filled that niche. I was passionate about it. I could see that I was helping lots of people. My passion within that, though, is that in this process, well can take on a much bigger definition than it had ever before that the cancer occurred. Well isn't just good enough. I mean, yes, the first thing people want, as you say in your title of your show, first people want to feel a little normal. Of course, that's true. But then as we get to the normal, as we really establish something that feels sort of normal, there's possibilities for being well that far exceed what could have happened before, both physically, in terms of energy, in terms of wellness, and certainly on the level of the spirit and the emotions. And so my passion is helping people rise into that next level where life expands after cancer, both physically and emotionally. And I get to see people's eyes light up as they realize, oh, wow, some great things are possible here. Life does not have to be smaller after all. That's what I really love.
That's wonderful. I love that. And I really enjoy hearing the evolution of your work. I had a similar path in that when all of these things happened to me, everything fell apart. I didn't have a job anymore, and so many personal issues had come to the forefront. So when I started thinking about what I was going to do next, things just started coming. And I started off in nutrition, started really paying attention to that. I got certified as a grief counselor. I was working with hospice patients. But then this whole spiritual realm, as you said, sort of comes in because you see this tie. Even when people are, quote unquote, healthy, there's still this real, people can be diminished in the spiritual sense and emotional sense. And there didn't seem to be anything out there, at least in the cancer component that I was working with a while ago, to help those people. It's like, and Dave has seen this too. Okay, well, your tests are all clear, or, we're going to put you on a maintenance schedule and see you later. And they give you, and I don't want to say that they fall, they let you completely stranded, but they're really, I believe, like you said, there's so much potential after a traumatic event like that. I mean, that's when the door opens. It's at those times of trauma or emergency situations when you all of a sudden see the light and there's this glimmer, there's this way to look at life differently, and that potential is fantastic. And I love being a part of helping people see that. So I really appreciate hearing that from you.
But it's got to be really hard to get the person ready for that perception, because the crisis, in my case, cancer, and other people with other kinds of crisis, create so much fear, and you start to not live in the moment. You live in what was happening in your past life that you've lost, and then you worry about all the things that are yet to come in the future. If only this will happen, then this will happen. I start to move everywhere other than being in the moment, because in the moment it is really scary. It is not a place I want. I really want to escape. how do I, move into this state that we're talking about of peace and moving to what we all want is a sense of well-being, whether it's a disease or death or disaster. There's something that I think you've got to do first before you can get out of this dilemma that fear that's weighing on you.
Certainly. You bring up a very good point. Fear is very, very present in the cancer survivor population. I say that not just based on my own experience, but even research proves this out. When people are asked about levels of fear and persistence of fear, in various groups, it can range from 33% to 96% have been found in research studies to be struggling with persistent fear. And it's really not surprising. If you think about it, again, people go into, if a person gets a cancer diagnosis, they're immediately funneled into a course of treatment about which they typically have no choice. And often, people are often kind, but there's often an overtone of, you got to do this or else. This is it, your only choice. So that immediately is disempowering. And, it's all people can do that's starting not to feel well, et cetera, to just show up and follow their instructions. And of course, that takes a lot of courage. I don't diminish that. But if you look at the context, it's very disempowering to the individual. So they come out of that feeling, consciously or not, but they're disempowered. And then survivorship requires, especially since there's no guidance right now around it, it requires a lot of courage, and people are really scared to step up. It's hard. It's understandably hard. They really have no idea what they need to do. So they're disempowered. They have no guidance. The system, unfortunately, fosters this. And then, as you say, Dave, there's also the concerns about the future. I may not have cancer today, but it can back any time, and that can be a very persistent fear. So that alone is something that really affects large numbers of people profoundly. Sometimes it's just the occasional thing, like most days I'm okay, but I have a scan coming up next week. What if I get bad news type of fear? So it's intermittent episodes. And for some people, it actually is like a dark cloud over their head most of the time, and that can be paralyzing. Mm. So that understandable viewing of the future as something that might be terrible, it stays with people and can keep them from living the life that they might otherwise want to live. So yeah, fear is very prevalent here, and one of the greater challenges in working with cancer survivors. We typically have to deal with that first, right? Before people, like you said, that's a hard thing to deal with before we can move through that into greater possibilities. So yes, by the way, that's something that was so clear to me. That this was a big problem, and I also found that there were very few resources to address it. So I actually began to create my own resources around that because fear is so prevalent, and we can't do much until we acknowledge and address it.
Do you think the fear comes from your loss of power? I mean, you're saying, you use the word disempowered, but I'm wondering, in some situations, you must give up power in order to deal with the challenge. For instance, with my oncology team, I had to learn how to give my power to them, give my life to them, believe in them, believe that I couldn't do anything before I could start to move. But on other life challenges, a financial crisis, a relationship crisis, you're not asked to give up your power, but without knowing it, you give up your power to that challenge that you've got to work through. And so the fact that you recognize, number one, I'm not living in the moment, I'm living in the past or the future. I also then recognize that I'm in a state of fear. And then you get to understand I don't have any, or believe you don't have any power.
That's right.
And I'm saying that believe because I know that's one of the statements you made on the last broadcast that I'm trying to lead you to bring up again. But that third step of a belief that I don't have any power, those three things, there's like the triumvirate that just crushes you. And you've got to deal with all of that before you can get grounded again. Am I on track here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, you said the magic word when you said, I believe I don't have power. So when you gave the example of I needed to turn my power over to the medical team, I would say you actually exercised your power there, or you may have at least, because you made a choice or you aligned with the choice. Let's put it that way. granted, they don't always present this as a choice, but if you are aware that, okay, I am making the conscious choice now to follow my doctor's directions because I believe that's the best path for me right now, you've actually just taken your power. Now, you don't feel that way at the time, typically, but in fact, that's why a third-party observer like Sheila or myself can help you see that you have not necessarily surrendered your power, even though you're going to surrender temporarily your body to the treatment that you have been asked to take. So and that's what I help people do, is recognize that even though they are feeling like they may not have choices, they're feeling vulnerable, very understandably, but that's not the same as giving up your power. As long as you are making your own choices, you are in a position of power. So that's the awareness that I help bring back to people. And then
subtle but important point, right?
Yes.
Well, and it's true, because, and I love, awareness is so important. And the other component that I studied was mind-body medicine. So it really is about helping people to understand that when they say something, you're allowed to say, well, wait a minute, I say that automatically. Now, is that true? So that belief thing is so ingrained in us, and it's so habitual that sometimes we need to learn to pay attention to our thoughts and see the connection and between what you're thinking and how your body responds to that, so that you can really feel like you do have some power. You really, it gives you a sense of control. It makes you realize that, you know what, I know the doctor said that, and I know that they have years and years of experience, but let me just give this a little bit of space and let me sit with this and see where my thoughts are going with this, see how I'm feeling. And I am able to ask questions. I am able to engage in the dialogue with the medical team. Ask those questions. Say, well, I know you're saying this, but this is what I'm feeling. Am I off base? And it is tough, because I know the medical industry it's so scary, and the ads on television, it's always about avoiding cancer, and it's the bad thing, and it's terrible, and I hope it doesn't happen to you. Well, anybody would be, so afraid of that happening to them based on what we've heard. So, it's just like, there's another way to describe cancer without it being so doom and gloom and so urgent. So urgent, like, oh my gosh, you have a diagnosis, you must do something now or else.
Yes.
That's a terrible position to put somebody in.
And furthermore, it's typically not true, I have to say. There are a few cases where somebody's got a very rapidly progressing cancer, and yes, it really is important to go in that same week, but the vast majority, that cancer has been brewing for years and years and years, and yes, we've come to a point where a decision needs to be made, but it does not need to be made in the next 24 hours. You can give a person a day or two, or a week even, to just absorb it a little bit, think of their questions, as you say, and again, take back their power around that process, but it's typically not offered.
But you have to put your head around that fact that you do have control, because the crisis is creating a big pot of emotions, your fears, your anxieties, you feel alone, you're looking for support, you're looking for connection. You don't feel calm, you're looking for peace, and if the crisis is continuing on and on, as in my case, it got to so bad that that's all I did all day long is, how do I find peace? But I'm thinking again of the people facing the hurricane right now. They're anxious, they're fearful, they feel alone, they are reaching out for what is going to happen, because they're painting scenarios of, hey, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my family, there may be death involved, there may be, they're painting all kinds of pictures of the what ifs. They're not living in the moment.
Yes.
And if they could just get back into the moment and say, what are those things that I have control of? I can evacuate and get to safe ground. I can get an electrical generator and put it into my house. I can get bottled water and some stock of food, because I know the power will be out for a week, not just hours or days.
Yes.
If you can certainly wrap your head around, what am I in control of? Then the switch goes on, at least for me in a practical sense, and for other people that I've talked to. It's getting to that realization, as you say, that it was a belief that you didn't have power, that you gave it to someone, and now you've got to understand, no. I align myself to a process, as you call it, And one of the phrases you used last time that I love is that you said you had to dance with cancer. And that was dancing with crisis. And I love that picture. That created my mind, because any crisis, is this the foxtrot? Is this the waltz? Is this, are you leading? Are you the follower? But you're still in control. You're dancing, So if you can just recognize that I am dancing to maybe some other music, but I'm adapting to that other music, I suddenly recognize I'm in control and I can find my way across the dance floor. I've lived with that picture. It's been so helpful since our last talk, because there's been many other sub-crises that have come that I hope the audience, reflects on that. I think it's such a great metaphor of dancing with your crisis.
Thank you. I'm glad it was useful to you. And actually, it implies something else too, doesn't it? So you very validly mentioned before that cancer is such a scary word for us. And there's a lot of reinforcement for that anything to do with cancer is something to be run away from. And so we, both emotionally and physically, we're always running the other direction, and that is totally exhausting. It's a hard way to live your life, right? Can't run forever. Now, what if, like you said, cancer could be thought of as something different? Not the enemy that we have to run from, but yes, a presence here that maybe I can have some other relationship with it. Dancing is one way to think about it. Dancing means I turn and face it and work with it in some way, but I'm certainly not running away. That wouldn't be a dance, would it? We're on the same dance floor. It may not have been the partner I picked originally, but here we are, the two of us. What can we create here? And so it becomes more of a dance or dialogue rather than a turning away and a running, which could keep a person perpetually in stress.
Yes. And, it brings to mind another way of just changing your mind about it. And that's one of the things I work with people the most on is, can you possibly see another way of looking at this? So I would even take it one level further and say, can you look at this situation? What if you had invited cancer into your life just for the second? Let's just talk about that. And people say, I would never do that. That's terrible. I said, I know, but let's look at this as if you had. How would you feel then? How would you treat it? So it is kind of like a dance. And it's like, okay, here you are in my life. I invited you in. I don't know why I did, but here we are. So you kind of have a different relationship with it. It is not bristling yourself against it, which we know further diminishes your physical self and actually can make you weaker and progress the cancer.
That's right.
Can you look at it in a different way and relax into it, which is why I love that dancing analogy. You relax into the dance, and it sounds crazy to people, but I'll tell you, it never works, like you said, to fight it and to bristle against it. I always tell people, when you put up this wall against something that you don't like, it just keeps bouncing off of you and coming back at you. When you relax, it almost, kind of goes right through you, or at least becomes a part of you, so you can have a chance to integrate it into your life. All right, so how do I deal with this now? Let's talk about it instead of arguing with each other. Let's have a discussion.
And I think you've got to be aware of what's actually happening to you, because we don't tend to be good observers when we're in a crisis situation.
That's right.
Again, staying with the metaphor of dancing, think of what it was like the very first time you ever danced with someone, back in high school or wherever, public school. This was not a good experience. Dancing was... It's even hard to find a partner, whether you were male or female, but you wanted to dance, but you couldn't dance, or you didn't believe you could dance, but you tried, and you got mocked for your lack of skill, and then you practiced, and the skill improved as you learned some new moves and techniques and different music, so that each of us who is going through a crisis have to recognize that part of our fear is the fact that we think we're not adequately trained to deal with that crisis. And yet, if we look at it, we can extrapolate to other crises where we have learned some skills. And everyone says, if you've gone through the hurricane once, the second hurricane isn't as bad. You've proven that you could survive that. And, if it's a really major disaster, well, I can get through it even more. Every time the challenge has been overcome, I have a different sense of self-worth, a stronger self-identity, and I recognize why I'm fearful, why I don't think I have power, and it comes back to how am I perceiving myself in that particular situation, and now what should I do to live in the moment? Because you can't generate new dance steps unless you're on the floor. You can go ahead and think about it in your head, about the future all you want, but you're not going to do the moonwalk until you actually do it a few times. So it's don't go into the past because you want to go there, because that was comfort then. We didn't have the crisis, we didn't have the disease, so we've gone past because that's our comfort. We then say, oh, look at all the things that are yet ahead of me, and I get even more anxious, and I don't have any peace, and I try to extrapolate that, okay, I can do this, I can do that. Get back to the moment.
That's right.
Be right here and start developing your skills. Now you're going to find what you're comfortable with, acknowledging the power that you have, finding comfort, and now finding this sense of peace, which is what we're searching desperately for in moments of crisis.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The present moment is our point of, it's our point of power. It's our point of power. Yes, our mind goes wandering all, present, future, but we really can't do anything about that. The only place we can do anything is in the present moment. So that of course is where I direct people to in various ways as we're dealing with fear, et cetera. We come back to, okay, fear is a creature of the future. We're inventing a future that may or may not happen. In fact, it probably won't, but that's where it belongs. So helping people relegate fear to the future and then bringing themselves back to the present moment is often how I work people through the fear and then beyond the fear in terms of making their subsequent choices from a place of more empowered, back in control.
If you could just look at the benefits that you've got from dealing with the crisis, many cancer patients, myself included, say this is a gift. I've learned so much from it. I'm a better person from it. I just wish I didn't have to have gone through it, but the fact that I did, it was really beneficial. And again, one of the notes I wrote last time, because it had just happened in talking to other cancer patients, this other cancer patient, it said, cancer taught me that I can be a greater me. It taught me how to be a greater you. And, that is so self-empowering when you suddenly sense what's happening under your control with your power. You are not flotsam on the wave here. It feels that way. It really, oh man, I know what that feels like. But if you can change your mindset, and it comes down to the simplest of phrase, get in the present. And I know that sounds it sounds so sensible, but Sheila, tell me how hard that is.
Well, you know what? It is interesting because there are certain things in our lives that bring us there automatically. Those daredevil people who are mountain climbers, right? So they're up on a ledge, and in one false step and they're gone. So they are in the present moment. They are totally aware. They are every fiber of their being is concentrating and right there. They're very mindful. Other situations that bring this up, I know it could be something as beautiful as birth. That, that instant when you see a child that's a newborn, there's something that overcomes you, and that is a sense of presence. You are right here in the moment. Death does the same thing. I've spent a lot of time on deathbeds. It's a sacred, wonderful, that's another area where people are so afraid of, but it is just such a beautiful moment of presence. So you have these in an emergency, so if you're just about to, I don't know, you're in a car accident or something, that all of a sudden brings all of your senses in and it makes you focused. We don't have to wait for that, though. We don't have to climb mountains, and we don't have to be present at birth or death or go through extreme situations. There's a way to do it, and there's lots of doors, lots of ways to get there. I'm teaching a retreat this weekend, and it's about space. It's called Nourishing Space, and it's how to see the space around things. You know, we always look at objects and people and relationships and thoughts, but there's space around all of those things. And so often, if we just give ourselves, we back up just a little bit and start becoming more aware of what's really going on rather than what our thoughts automatically take us to.
Yes.
That just has this beautiful cushioning buffer around the crisis, around the person, or around whatever's bothering you. And it just allows a little bit of time for you to regroup, reassess what's going on in your mind and your body. And somehow that can pull you right down to this present moment, even if it's for just a split second. Every time you can do it, it's just like a breath of fresh air for you. It's rejuvenating. It makes you almost want to get addicted to that feeling because it's liberating to be there. It really is.
It is.
And we're talking some pretty heavy life philosophy here. You know, I mean, it reminds me of our conversation a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about end of life with
Right.
Patty Burgess, and it relates to, I think, a story, Shani, that you had mentioned about your father and learning that every day counts, and that's, you know, such an important concept again in order to be in the present, to understand what is today. Maybe you could elaborate on that point.
Well, just to fill out that piece of it, my father was 52 years old when he was hit as a pedestrian by an automobile, nearly killed. But he came through that experience, and he lived for another 28 years. Having realized how fragile life is, those 28 years he lived with so much awareness of today and the present moment. He didn't waste time, and he didn't waste words, and every encounter with somebody was precious. So he was a great role model for me. I was already an adult, that went into my adult years. I had this great role model of somebody who really feels the preciousness of life and treats it accordingly. When my father was 80, he did die of cancer. He had pancreatic cancer. That was very sad and very hard. But because he had lived the life that he had lived, that was simply what the final chapter looked like. His life counted for so much that the cancer was almost an afterthought at that point. So we don't think, when we think back on my father, we don't even think about cancer, even though it was a tough chapter there. It was the life that counted. But I actually wanted to refer back to another metaphor you put in there, Dave, just before that. You feel like flotsam on the waves. I get it. When you're in an emotional place, and of course in survivorship, it can be an emotional roller coaster. Things come up, you don't know how to deal with them. Some days are good, and then all of a sudden something throws you off course. Like many people will tell me, a friend has just had a recurrence. Okay, so it didn't happen to them, but it was in their environment, and that's so hard for them to take. Yes, it is. I acknowledge that those things are hard to hear and to deal with. Nevertheless, in the greatest hurricane, in the greatest storm, no matter what the surface of the ocean looks like, if you go down deep, there's a place that's calm. And that's how my mentor helped me see this, that the emotions are on the surface, and they can be very stormy. They can be very hard to deal with. But at the very same time, you go drop yourself down like a rock to the bottom. And at the bottom, the fish are swimming and the eels are swimming. All this calm is going on. And that always exists, even during the hurricane. And so when I help people through emotions, I help them drop themselves down to that place which is always present. And that's the place where you can go. From there, you can observe what you said, Sheila, that you can start to observe yourself rather than feel like you're the one being jostled around all the time. You can start to say, okay, let me see if I can adopt a different perspective. And of course, you and I help people do that. But that's the place they need to be in order to be even ready to take on that other perspective, to even see it.
Yeah. And it's sort of a hard concept for people to hear or to get their heads around when they say, I'm looking for peace. I just want peace. And you say, it's here.
Yes.
You're just not seeing it. You're just not seeing it. So
there.
It is there. It is there. It's down deep at the bottom.
That's right. It's 100 feet down.
So the trick is, all right, how are we going to get you there now? How are we going to open your eyes? Because all you're doing is closing your eyes. So we're going to try lots of different things. There's not just one way. There are many, many ways to get there, and you play with it. You find different ways to communicate that eventually resonate with that individual. Yes. And it's completely independent of, there's no magic routine you could do or technique you can do that always works. You just have to find something that feels right to you. And all of a sudden you're going to wake up one day and you go, there it is. That's it. And it's not anything, I don't ever feel like it's anything that I do. I certainly isn't. It is just kind of asking people to experiment, to play with it, say, try this. What about this? Have you thought about this? And let them go on that little path that takes them eventually to that place where they go, here it is all along. I didn't know. And I'll say, how'd you find it? And they'll say, well, I did this. I thought, poof, never thought about that.
Exactly. Yes. I would emphasize and reiterate that, yes, you're, my experience too is that this is a very personal thing for people, because the first thing that will come up when we talk about going to your center or, going to the present moment is, oh, but I tried meditating and it didn't work for me. Now, if meditating works for you, it is a wonderful way to do this. It is very effective, but I would have to agree, not being a sitting meditator myself, I have to say, yes, I understand. And yet I find that I can be totally in a meditative space walking. That's my, walking works for me. So it's an activity. It's hardly sitting still, but that does allow me to let go of other things that are in my mind and become very present with what's around me. So that's what works for me. And it can be an active thing. For some people, it actually might be playing sports. Some people play sports in a way that allows them to really just enjoy the moment of it, feel their body, appreciate their body for what it's doing, etc. For some people, that works. So it can look like an awful lot of different things. And I totally support your point that all of them are valid. But it's about that moment when you feel like, here I am. Oh, I can just feel, I can feel everything that's happening in the current moment.
You really do have a buffet of tools and choices, and it's learning about them. Certainly, I was not living a life prior to cancer that had me look at a lot of different tools, and going through the treatment and the recovery and now survivorship, I've learned so much that's applied to so many other things, some of which are very scientific and medical focus. For instance, deep breathing and meditation to bring calm to the body, because you learn that you do have a mind-body chemistry in action here, and negative thoughts create negative chemicals, which create negative results, and positive thoughts create positive chemicals. We can get into the actual, chemical that we want, but conceptually, there seems to be something that you can do medically to calm your body down. And as we saw last week in talking to David Bennett on a near-death experience, we opened the door that maybe there's a spiritual dimension for some. Now, some go to a religious dimension and connect with their God and ask for help from their God, and may bring angels to help them and guide them. Others are saying, I'm connecting to source, to the divine. And as David said, he had a soul family that he saw in his, his spiritually transformative experience, which opened up other things for him to bring into the current moment to help deal with the peace and the quiet that he needs throughout his life, as we all do when we're in the crisis. And I guess the point I'm making is that you don't have to stop. I'm so glad when you came on last time and came on again today, because you have a holistic mindset. It's not one size fits all. There are many different pieces to the wardrobe that you want to wear, and some of it to some people are very strange. If I went to work dressed like a clown, some people would find that very odd. Others, depending on my office, may think that's just terrific. So, you have to take a look at what's comfortable for you. And if you have, a set of skills that come from the medical team or the disaster team or the divorce team or the debt team that are all wrapped around you, they all have information for you to absorb. But I got a sense from what we talked about last week, and knowing some of the guests that we've got coming forward, there may be some spiritual dimensions, and that manifestation that can actually be a new tool that you use to create the dreams and the world that you envision being on. Let me throw that at both of you, because I know you each have on that.
Huge topic. That almost could be its own call.
It will be. Come back, folks. But, we got many weeks on this.
Okay. But here's in here, or this topic. First of all, from what you said, notice how all of a sudden you were talking about the fact that you were not alone. When people go to, if we want to call this a spiritual space, however we want to call it, but this place of starting to come back to their power, they realize down at the bottom of the ocean there that maybe there's a possibility I'm not alone. I was feeling alone. And when we're in a very vulnerable emotional space, we do feel alone, because vulnerability is viewed as weak in our culture, and not a place that people want to be with you when you're vulnerable. But actually, many people come through cancer and realize the opposite is actually true. It is one of the gifts of the cancer experience that all of a sudden, when I really needed people, they showed up for me, or at least certain ones did. And so people become aware again of that possibility that people can show up when you're vulnerable rather than shy away or stay away. So we tend to feel alone when we're vulnerable, but in fact, even in terms of physical circumstances, we're often not. And then there's the next level of that, which is, okay, maybe my friends and family don't completely understand where I'm at, but who else might be with me? And you do get this sense then, call it angels, call it the universe, call it guides, call it God, whatever person wants to call it, but there is something else out there, not tangible, but something else out there which is with me, and I am not alone. So whether we look at it from a physical perspective, a spiritual perspective, or both, given that a person comes back to the present moment, takes a little perspective, this is another possibility they're able to entertain, that they would not be in the midst of the emotional thunderstorm, that they're in fact not alone. So that's another possibility that opens up, and that of course is very comforting.
Yes, absolutely. I almost feel like when you can get to the point where you're noticing that people around you are supportive, you have such a connection to them. And what I have found personally, and also with clients, is that you start sort of, when you become more aware of your own thoughts and the things going on with you, and then you're more aware that people are supportive of you, you feel this connection with them, and you start seeing other connections, which is that deeper level. Then what else am I connected to?
Yes, exactly.
So, and it could be, your dog or nature or whatever. All of a sudden there's this bigger thing out there that you feel connected to that wasn't there prior to the problem, prior to your crisis. And I think that's what leads people down the spiritual path, because it's far out of the realm of your everyday, go to work, get your things done, raise your family, do your thing. Mm-hmm. It sort of is this very tender spot that is new to you, perhaps, and you want to investigate it. And that's where that, I believe, leads people down to that spiritual path.
Yes. So what, if I had to recap so far where we're at, is that if we can take enough perspective, and this is hard to do alone, it's often helpful to have somebody work with you through this. But if in these emotional crises, when it feels like all I can feel or see or perceive is what this crisis, if we're able to step back, then all of a sudden we see new possibilities, as we've been talking about, new ways of thinking about it, dancing with cancer rather than running, for example, and we begin to entertain the possibility that we're not completely alone here. Another aspect, another possibility is opened up that expands our way of thinking about it. So this is what happens. We go into a much more creative and expansive thought space if we're able to step back, be in the present moment, but step back from the present moment and observe it a little bit rather than just being part of the thunderstorm or the hurricane, whatever we want to call it.
And as we know physiologically, the more relaxed you are, your brain gets back into gear. You're not in that fight or flight where your brain is shut off to, just to use your muscles. Your brain is now like, now I'm open to creative possibilities.
Yes.
So the only way to do that is to learn how to relax and be peaceful and still. And whatever way you find to do that, that is the key. That is the key to moving on to the next step, to finding out what your purpose is, to explore new realms. And it's really and there's so much room for opportunity at that point. It like opens doors that you never thought were even there.
Exactly.
Well, you do go into search mode. I mean, I think that this crisis, it forces you to ask some very strange questions, like that there are no immediate answers to. Why is this happening to me? Why now? What does it mean? It was this ordained? Was this serendipitous? Is God punishing me? I mean, we jump into a whole bunch of very big questions, as they label them, that we then try to search for answers. And some of us go to our religious family and try to get guidance from the texts that have the words of wisdom. Others move into other directions, looking for that connection, looking for the answers, looking for comfort. And I think through that exploration process, as I said earlier, you pick up some new skills that do make you stronger, that do allow you to get a sense that I am gaining some sense of control, because by asking the question, even getting a partial answer, go to my minister, my pastor, or my rabbi, or my spiritual guide, or my spiritual leader, something got returned to that question that I can now chew on, which gives me a sense of empowerment. Look at that.
Right.
I'm doing something about this. And then it sort of takes baby steps that you move forward until you find, as I told everyone, after 3.5 years on Labor Day weekend of this year, I finally found my sandbar to stand on. It took 3.5 years of struggling to keep my head above water, but man, I found it. And it was a bunch of baby steps that I had to take. And I know that the solutions are not set in stone. The shore still is in the distance, and the sharks are still swimming behind me. But man, I'm not treading water now. I've got a perspective that's totally different. I have some sense of calm, some sense of peace, some sense of control. And now I'm trying to package that up to build a new set of Lego life blocks. I'm snapping them together to create a new Dave. I'm trying to find, as this show is called, find your new normal. What is the new world that I am now immersed in, that's still in flux, still in change? And I question, really, 3.5 years? And others say, yeah, it might take 10 years, I mean, I know people who are still grieving from the loss of a loved one, that crisis is taking forever to get them to find their new normal, to find what I've called the sandbar to stand on, to get some fresh air. So it's an individual journey that we're all taking. And although the three of us are providing lots of information, we don't have any answers here. All we're sharing is some experiences and some perspectives that we all, in our own way, have found do work with some people at certain times. And we're just saying, this is your buffet, folks. You're facing issues of your crisis. We know that there's this peace that you're searching for. And I think that if you pay attention to what the three of us are talking about, there's probably something there that you can grab hold of to let you take your next baby step forward.
Yeah. And so notice, Dave, that the original questions that you were talking about, why did this happen to me? Why me? Why, those still focus on the crisis. Yeah. But having taken the steps back that we just talked about, more perspective, realize you're not alone, then you also, what that opens up space for is maybe I can entertain a different possibility. And so what I find is people who are saying they want to be well, they have to believe that the possibility of wellness is out there for them.
Yes.
So this is why, again, as I work with people, through fear, if all you can focus on is the fear, then your possibilities are going to look pretty dark. But if we can entertain that, okay, yes, that's a possibility. We're not going to deny that. And there's also a possibility that you could be fine. In fact, you could thrive. And what might that look like? Now, you're right. It takes baby steps. It's not, it doesn't happen on the first day of dealing with this. That's okay. But as long as we're working in that direction, all of a sudden, one day, all of a sudden you say, oops, I'm on a sandbar. I can get fresh air. There's a shore out there. I'm not treading water all the time. So your perspective shifted from, to, I think, you know what, I can actually believe something really great is out there. And sure enough, your healing reflects that. Your physical healing.
And it's not just a physical healing that we're talking about. We can generalize this to any kind of crisis. I mean, if you've had a bad relationship, a bad divorce, but you're sitting there now fearful of the next relationship, and you're living in the past of all the baggage that each of us have, or anticipating the future of all the new arguments you're going to have, you're painting pictures all over the place. It's the same picture that the three of us are talking about when we're spending a lot of time here talking about cancer. It is about a crisis that you are facing, and how do you get to be in the moment? I laugh because Sheila says, "Who is this guy and what is he saying?" Because that's not the way I met him. and
it's good. It's so nice.
You know, I am the student here. The master has gently shown me that, man, there's magic by living in the present. It's the easiest thing to do. It's much harder to live in the past or the future. I can just be here today with my three friends, the three of us, two friends, talking, enjoying it, gaining today, and still deal with all the other crises of life that you have to deal with. This is a very interesting piece. It's like gravity. Once you understand that gravity exists, we're telling you, living in the moment is just as powerful as gravity. Accept that as a part of life, and then your life moves on in some very exciting ways. There is joy and happiness and peace ahead for all of us, no matter what crisis we've in or just come through. You can see what the process is to get there. It just means rethinking a lot of stuff, and that's what each of these weeks that we're coming together is, to give you little tidbits of information to digest with your afternoon coffee. We're the tea biscuits here. We're the coffee.
Right.
Gnaw on us for a while.
It's true, and I really appreciate the fact that it's not just cancer, and certainly we've gone through that conversation a lot. But there are so many things that happen, and when you and Dave, you were saying it's easy. I would say it's simple, not so easy for most of us. But it is wonderful. It's a lot less suffering to live here instead of living in the what if land, or the I wish I did, or she should have, or so there is this. It is a peaceful way of living, not always easy to get to just because of our habits. So it's just a matter of looking at things a little bit differently and understanding that you can rewire your brain. You can change the way that you've always thought about things, even though that seems crazy. You could take your strongest belief and start questioning it and realize you were wrong about that all of your life. And it's scary at first to hear that and realize it and acknowledge that. But once you do, you think, well, what else did I believe in that's not true? And so you start questioning all kinds of things that you were holding on to that were really not healthy for you physically or emotionally. And you get to let them go. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, as you say that, the metaphor that comes up for me is a plant that's in a pot that's too small. That plant may have been planted as a seed in that, soil in that pot and not know any of the pot in the universe, but after a while, its roots can get suffocated and it's not going to thrive. And all of a sudden, if somebody comes along and helps it, be transplanted to a garden or at least a larger pot, all of a sudden it has room to spread out, room to grow. And so, our beliefs can be like that. Our beliefs are, sometimes we hold on to them kind of for safety, but there can come a point, especially in crisis, where our beliefs can get constraining to us. And if we're willing to consider that there are other beliefs, or even just to tweak them, we don't have to throw them away. We can just massage them or work through them and find that we can adopt a belief that's maybe similar but a little bit expanded, or maybe it's an entirely different belief depending on the circumstance. One or the other might be more appropriate. But the bottom line is that as we come to a belief that more aligns with where we are in life and who we are now, leveraging the strength and the wisdom, for example, from a cancer experience, we're going to feel like our roots have more room to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And look at that. We're at the top of the hour. I don't know where these hours go. I mean, the discussion folks, I'm biased. I'm enjoying these calls. I hope you out there are also getting something out of it. There's a lot of wisdom being shared. And before we go, I mean, Dr. Fox, please tell everyone how they can find you and what they're going to do when they get to your website. Give us your web address and what's over there that everyone should go and look for.
Thank you. My website is www.drshanifox.com. So that's DRSHANIFOX.com. And when you get there, the first thing that you'll see at the homepage is the Cancer Survivors Manifesto. That's a free download for you. That's to perhaps ignite the thoughts about what possibilities there are for you out there. And then from that point, you can look through my website. You'll find my book there, The Cancer Survivors Fear First Aid Kit, if that's a particular issue for you. That's a good way to start, by how to address fear when it comes up. And from there, that's a short-term solution. Then it's the extent that we want to evaluate what's holding you back, what's keeping you a little bit fearful. Longer-term process, I offer coaching services, and that's fully explained on my website.
And if you're going to go over to Amazon and get the Fear First Aid Kit, make sure that you leave a comment on there. The references, or not references, referrals, testimonials, I guess, the endorsements are very important. And it's an excellent guide to deal with fear, regardless of the crisis that you're in. And are there any final takeaway points that you want to make before we close up? Anything you want to make sure the audience has heard and has made notes on that will help them deal with finding peace in their adventure with crisis?
If I were to leave a parting thought, I guess I am. What I would say most of all is that as stormy as things look, as hard as it seems to think about extracting yourself, and as endless as it might seem, there is always a place of peace. There is always somebody with you, tangible or intangible. You're never alone, and you're stronger than you think, even when you're the most vulnerable. So if you can remember that, that's great. If not, find somebody to help you remember that, because that is the point from which you'll be able to start expanding the possibilities for yourself, the choices that you could make, the thoughts you could think, the things that will lead you out of that current moment and into the ones that are feeling like more positive and more optimistic for you.
And over to you, Sheila, for your closing thoughts.
Oh my gosh, this was such a quick hour again. I'm so glad to have met you, Dr. Shani, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that there are doctors out there like you. I am have always been wishing that we would have more people going into lifestyle medicine. And I do believe there is a change. There is a shift happening where the focus is not on invasive procedures and pharmaceuticals all the time. So with my work in mind-body medicine, I know that there are physicians being trained right now in this area. Mm-hmm. Lovely, wonderful, exciting stuff. And it's great to see it firsthand here this week. So thank you.
It was a great hour. On behalf of the audience, thank you very much, Shani. This was great for you to find some time, and I know a very busy schedule with lots of exciting adventures. And you know, I got to say that this is one person that you all out there have to meet. You've got to go over to her site and take a look at what she shares and what she's written, and follow her on HuffPost. There's a lot of help sitting out there in Portland. And so thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
A joy to be here. A joy to be here.
For all the rest of you, I hope you come back next Thursday at 3 o'clock. It's going to be a different show next week. We've had 4 interesting shows with all kinds of information, and I'm information overload. I've got a whole bunch of things that we've talked about that I want to go into a Q&A session with you out there. So, you know, if you haven't watched some of the shows, go watch the replays. They're all on findyournewnormal.com/past broadcast, or go over to our Facebook channel of Find Your New Normal live, and there you'll find the replays of all our sessions, and get your questions out and send them off to us if you'd like. There's an Ask Dave section on the Find Your New Normal site that you could leave your question. And Sheila and I are going to be here to try and focus the discussion and try to review some of the things that we've got to make sure that we're getting something practical and not just entertainment value. There's so much thing. We're trying to help you deal with something in a different way. And I think the guests that we're bringing on have had very different perspectives. And if we can get you grounded and focused on this, then we have three more guests coming up on an extension of this topic that will have more value to you, having digested what we've done the last 4 weeks. So please come back next Thursday at 3:00. Watch the replays. Follow us. We do post everything on Facebook, so like us and share us and let people know what we're all doing. And if you do have people you'd like us to interview, then we'd love to meet them and bring them on board. We're building quite a community. We've crossed the 1,000 mark of viewers already.
Wonderful.
I'm amazed at how many people are watching each of the shows. I mean, this is quite unexpected, and I'm very thankful to all of you out there who are spending some time watching us. And please leave your comments. We will be responsive. And those of you that come on to the show where the action is right here. Join us. We'll bring you on camera. You can meet our guests and interact. It doesn't have to be just replay only. But we've got, if you go to findyournewnormal.com/live is always the place where you'll get the information of what our guests are all about, their bios and our topics. So once again, thank you all for coming. Want to see you again next week. And thank you again, Dr. Fox, my friend, and Sheila. It's always wonderful to have you here. It's just a delight on Thursday afternoon. So thanks very much. We'll close it out now and see you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.